Hello, my name is Micah Watson and I'm a composer and music producer. Welcome to this lesson 6 of Mastering Ableton Live series where I am going through the whole Ableton Live manual and teaching you pretty much everything there is to know. So today we'll be looking at chapter 5, and there is a little bit of an overlap between chapter 5 and what I did in my part 4 of chapter 4 lesson previously. So I'm not going to go through the manual verbatim, but I'll be going through all the new things and explaining all the big important things. If there's anything I left out and you want help with, please leave it in the comment section and I would love to help you. But largely this will be about how to manage your sets and files and how to export various different things. So let's go. Let's first of all recap on the browser. By now you should be familiar with the browser on the left here. The browser is divided into 2 categories and you can change the split by hovering your mouse over this grey line and moving it around like this. So on the left you'll see categories and places. Basically categories sorts all your live sounds and packs into various categories. So for instance here, all of these things are sorted into various sounds. So all your brass sounds will be under brass, all your percussive sounds will be under percussion. Under drums you'll have all your drums, so these will either be drum instruments like drum racks, which has a grid 4x4 as you can see here, where you can load various different drum samples, or it'll be one shots, but it'll just be one waveform without the grid. You've got your instruments, your audio effects, MIDI effects, all these kinds of things. Clips, samples. Max for Live, you might not know what this is. Max for Live is a software suite that goes well with Ableton Live, where you can create your own effects and routings and knobs and all sorts of fun things to kind of enhance the creativity of the way you make music. So it's pretty cool. I guess it's kind of like a mixture of programming and building Lego. Alright, under places, this will be more places on your hard drive that you've linked to Ableton Live. So you're always going to have packs, user, library, and current project. Your packs would be all your sound packs from Ableton Live that you have downloaded and installed. So like grand piano, demo song, sample sounds. Your user library, this will be typically things that I've made myself. So like any presets I've saved and that kind of thing. Current project will be this current project, which actually is just untitled. So let's just open something. So this will be the current project, all the various sets I've got and the samples and stuff. And then these 2, desktop and documents. I've added these both manually. This is literally like my documents folder on my computer and my desktops folder, and you can add them by just hitting add folder and adding one. Or if this is open, you can just drag a folder in like that as well. Alright, now this search bar is pretty cool. If there's something you're looking for, you can type it in. If you don't want to use your mouse to get there, you can also just hit Ctrl F and type it in. Let's do something a bit more realistic, like drum. And then you can also hit enter, and you can use your keyboard to go up and down. And to open something, you can hit right. Hi there. And or to preview it, you can also hit Shift enter. Or you can also enable this preview button manually. You might see this little raw button on the right. So if you enable a raw button, it will preview the sample without warping it to the tempo of this current project. So depending on your preferences, the live preferences, typically these samples will be warped in a way to match your project parameters or your live set parameters. Okay, so how to add clips to a new project. You can literally, let's go to clips, you can just drag it in. So the reason this isn't working is because the clip I'm currently holding is an audio clip and this is a MIDI track. So I go to the audio track and I can just drag it in there. Or I can just drag it into an empty slot and it'll create the relevant track for me. Sometimes if I've got an instrument, so let's check out, let's create a drum rack. This would be a good example. I've got space for 16 different drum sounds. And I might be like, well, I don't know which one to use. And so you can move around with your mouse. But another quicker way to preview samples, or candidates rather, for your drum rack is to enable hot swap mode. To enable hot swap mode, wow, tongue twister, you hit this kind of like recycle-like looking icon. It goes orange and you can see swapping instrument. There are various places you can activate this. You can activate it on this actual pad, or you can hit Q on your keyboard. So if I've got it enabled in here, I can use my keyboard and go up and down and preview / audition various kick drums, and when I found the one I want, I can hit enter, and to exit preview mode I can just hit Q. I don't know what just happened there, man. That was weird. But there we go. I can just exit like that, or I can exit like that, or I can exit with Q. So many options. Okay, now let's talk about sample files. So when you put a sample file into a new track for the first time, Ableton Live is going to need to analyze it. These are already analyzed, so not the best example, but if I put it there, nope, it's not right. Typically if you put a new sample in there, it's going to load. It happened earlier on in this video. What Live is doing, it's analyzing the file to get its sample rate and its bit depth so that it can better understand its warping capabilities for the file. So what that means is Live will be able to better time stretch it when you kind of doing all these warp things and playing around with your sample. When Ableton analyzes this, Live creates this ASD file, which is an analysis file, and it contains all sorts of information about the audio. You won't find these files in your browser, like in your Live browser, but you can find them on your actual computer browser. And they also store things like your default clip settings. So if you recall from a previous video, your default clip setting will be all the settings that come up by default when you first pull this clip into your track. So if I save, reverse this track and do all sorts of funny things with it, and this is now how I want this track to sound, like forever. Then I can save this as the new default clip setting by hitting the save button here. And this will also be saved in the analysis file. However, I do not want to do that. And also note that saving your default clip setting is different to actually saving the clip. I can also save this as a new clip called, say, 00dB flash 2 by just pulling and dragging it there. Saving it. Oh, that's not right. And that's very different to saving the default clip setting. So I hope I've made that distinction clear. You can also save your default settings as to whether Ableton Live saves all these analysis files. So you can do that by Live preferences. File folder and create analysis file. So by me it's on. The reason you'd want this on is that if it's off, every time you drag a sample into Live, it's going to have to analyze it again, and it might not take a long time every time, but it takes a little bit of time each time, and you know, time is short. So I just kind of keep this on, but if you want it off, that's where you change it. I also want to talk about the cache. So this is kind of like a memory in Ableton Live of various files and things that you've used. And you can set things like your minimum free space and your maximum cache size. If any of these are breached, so for instance, if your minimum free space is kind of like about to exceed this, then Ableton Live will begin deleting old things in its cache. Similarly, if your maximum cache size is reached, Ableton Live will begin cleaning out the cache. You can also manually do this by hitting cleanup. Okay, so now let's talk about exporting. So if you go to File, Export Audio Video, or you can go Shift Command R, you get your Export Audio Video dialog. So while this Export Audio Video dialog is open, I can't really click on my set, so it's going to be a bit tricky to show you some of these things, but I'll do my best. So you can choose all your parameters in this dialog box, including which track gets rendered, so whether it's your master or like a selected track like bass only. You can choose where it starts, how long the audio is, your sample rate, all sorts of things, and then also your video. This video isn't available for the Live Lite and intro versions, so sorry to you guys, but yeah. Okay, so rendering your track from master will render everything that comes out of your master fader, which basically means everything combined, summed up. It's the final audio. All individual tracks would render every single individual track, so you'd get bass audio, pad audio, short bright audio. It would even give you return track audio, so if you had some kind of effects channel over here that had like reverb put on everything, then you get like your separate reverb track over there. So that's pretty cool. You can also render selected tracks only, so if I exit this and I select, say, just these two, hitting Command click on the various ones, and Command Shift R, opening this again, selected tracks only, then I'm only going to get short bright and drums. I can also alternatively just click short bright and render it, and then later also go click drums and only render this drums track. In your set you might have different options here depending on the various tracks that you have. So this pad is that pad, short bright is this short bright, and so forth. Okay, render length, render start. Okay, so at the moment this would be starting at 1.1, so if I go to my arrangement view, 1.1 is here, it would start here. And then render length, this would be 4 bars. Another quick tip if you want to save a specific section, I'm double clicking on this beat time bar, and I get this little marker locator thing. And you can highlight it and change the size. Make sure that it's highlighted and that you have blue in the middle here, not that it's kind of not selected. Like here, this isn't selected and it's not going to help you at all. So make sure it's selected. So here it starts at 34 and the render length is 4 bars. Render as loop. So if you want it to be seamlessly loopable, you can render as loop. Basically what it does is it takes any effects endings like reverb tails from your rendered length and it adds that to the beginning of your file so that when you loop the file, the reverb doesn't get chopped off and just start dry from the beginning. Don't worry too much about the technicalities, just know that if you're writing like a menu song for an app and you want it to loop seamlessly, then render as loop is a good option to have on here. So you can also choose your file types, your sample rate, bit depth, all of these things. You can upload to SoundCloud and you can choose your various video encoders and encoder settings. So just quickly here to dither options. If your bit depth is less than 32, like 16, then as part of the downsampling, your audio goes through a process called dithering. And what it does is it basically adds a little bit of noise to try and fix some of the artifacts that happen from this bit depth downsampling. And there are various algorithms that you can use, like triangular, rectangular, no dither, or these power modes, and they all have different functions. These 3 power modes, I think, aren't available in the live intro and light versions. You can also put no dither, but typically triangular is the good one to go, or actually just export in 32-bit depth. Convert to mono, normalize. So to normalize a file basically just means to take the wavelength and amplify everything so that the maximum wavelength peak leaves the least amount of headroom. So it's kind of like amplifying your track to an extent. It's not compressing, it's just making things louder. Alright, so video, so you've got your different options, whether you want to create a video. You can't create a video out of nothing, only if you've got a video file. You can render the audio and the video, and you can choose your video encoder based on which encoders you have installed on your computer, so that's separate to live. If you don't have the right encoder, you need to go get the right software. And then encoder settings, sometimes this will be enabled and sometimes not, depending on the encoder options available to you. And when you're done, you hit export. Typically it's really quick. This is called offline rendering, if it's kind of just quickly does its thing. Although this wasn't a very large piece of anything, there's nothing there. But you can also do real-time rendering, and this is what you're going to have to do if you have some kind of external instrument. So if you're routing the sound and it's kind of going out your laptop or computer into, say, a analog compressor, and then kind of back into your computer later, then you're going to have to do a real-time render. To do real-time render, there'll be a couple options available to you, and these are described really nicely in the manual. Waiting for external instruments and effects to become silent, and your progress. They also auto restarts on dropouts, so sometimes there'll be a little dropout if your CPU power wasn't quite strong enough, and then you can set it that live just deletes these and restarts, and at the end you can get a dialog box that shows you how many times it restarted. It might be worth looking into it if you keep having dropouts. Maybe close some applications on your computer or get a better computer. So let's talk about exporting clips and MIDI clips. So these drums, these are MIDI guys. You can right click, export clip. So it's Shift Command E, or you can go to File, Export MIDI clip. Just note that this is not saving the clip, it's exporting these MIDI data. So if you don't know the difference between MIDI and audio, please do look at my video, the difference between MIDI and audio, where I explain it. I'm not going to explain it now, but just know that they are different. If you want to save this as a clip, you can drag it into your project folder down here in the browser, let go, give it a new name. And that also holds true for audio files. You can just drag it in, give it a new name. So the cool thing about sets is actually you can do a very similar thing. You can save a new set with just this short bright and just this pad by command clicking them, so selecting multiple tracks and just dragging them in. You get this new set ALS file and you can rename it and save it. You can also merge sets, so I can take the set and drag it into the set. You can see it's kind of like at a lower opacity and you can see all the tracks and things, and I can let go. And there we go, now I've got everything from another name copy and another name test. I can also open this set in the browser and say only choose the bass and drag it into the set, or I can only choose a very specific bass clip. And I can even put it into this track there. So that's a really cool feature to note, especially if you know where a clip is residing in a live set, but you don't know, you can't seem to be finding it here. You can actually just toggle to your actual live set, test project, sample, whatever, and drag it in from your project folder into live. Okay, you can also change templates, so this is really, really cool. If you open a live set, new live set, don't save, thank you. There's a template that typically opens, so this is the default template: 2 MIDI channels, 2 audio channels, reverb and delay, return track and a master track. But what if you never use return tracks? You should, but just hypothetically you didn't, and this is kind of all you ever work with. Well, you can delete those and save this as your new template. So go to Live Preferences, save current set as default. This is under File folder, by the way, in case you had a different thing checked, and you can click Save. And this will now be your new default. If you open a new live set, this is what you're going to get. But what if you actually end up finding out how return tracks work and now you want them? Well, you can just insert a return track each time. But you can go to Preferences and clear the Save Current Set as Default, and this will restore it back to the default setting, which you got when you first installed Live. Don't save. And now you got the return tracks again. Maybe sometimes you only work with MIDI and sometimes you only work with audio and you want various different templates. Well, you can do this too. Go to your user library, create a folder called templates. So this folder shouldn't be there yet. It's really important that you call it templates, because this is where the magic happens. And save. So I said I only do MIDI, right? Okay, so I'm going to save this. Okay, so I've essentially saved a set that's just these 2 MIDI tracks. I've saved it, but I need to move it into the templates folder. Now when I open this, it says untitled, it's not called MIDI, and that's because Ableton sees it as a template and still an empty project. This is really cool if you do a very diverse mix of things. So for instance, like say EDM, you have your separate template. You can even save like specific MIDI effects and instruments and presets and all of that. You can save that as a template so that every time you open that specific thing, this will be what opens. So it can save a lot of time. Anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. So let's talk about live projects. Okay, so live project is essentially a folder that holds everything. It's got the live set, it's got the live clips, it's got all the presets all in one place. So here my test project, it's got everything. It's got my samples, my various sets and so forth. And it's always a good idea to either save your sets in a pre-existing project if it's related to all of these things, or to save a live set as something completely new in a new project. So Ableton, it automatically created a new project folder where it contains my new set. And obviously here it contains all my tracks and samples. Typically, us users don't create these project folders. Ableton does it. And we have full control to move things around. So if I don't like this project folder, I can just move this on my desktop. But this is not a good idea because you're essentially ripping apart a family. Don't do that. No, it's good to keep the set and all the data in one place and to keep it organized. So let's say something got separated. And I have an example of this from a previous video I made for you guys. Okay. Whoa, that's weird. Okay, just imagine you pulled it away and you can't find the sample. Alright, it has found it because in my previous video I basically relocated it. But you can find your samples. Go to File, Manage Files, Manage Set. If this file is missing, under Missing File it would say there's a missing file. Similarly, go to Manage Files, Manage Project. Missing files, if there'd be missing files from this project, so not even this particular set but in this whole project, it would show here they're missing files. In which case you could automatically find them or manually drag it in again. So okay, now you can see here missing file. One file used by this live set is missing. So you can locate it by hitting the locate button. And you can either do an automatic search. You can set the search folder here. So if I think I know where it is, if I think it's in this folder, you can set that. Or if you want to do a big general search, you can go as big as your hard drive. It'll just take longer. But if you know where the file is, you can also just go into your browser and drag it in. And now you can see it's found it and it's doing its thing. But I'm going to just talk a bit more about this manage file thing. So file, manage files. This file manager is incredibly powerful. You can access it like I just did now, or if you go into your browser and you go to a project file or project folder, you can control click it and hit manage project. And you'll get the relevant window over here. But here you can manage your sets, you can manage your projects, and you can manage your entire user library. Things that you'd be managing is things like where your external files are. You can have a look at all the unused files. So if you've got lots of old projects and lots of unused files that are just hogging space, this will calibrate that all for you, and you'll be able to choose whether to get rid of them or not. You get cool information like how much data you're using, if there are any missing files, and of course if there are missing files you can find them, and also things like your project location. You can also see where all your external files are located. So I'm now looking at this particular set, so I'm going to see where all these files are located. So you can go to view and replace files. If it's closed, just click on the triangle to open it, click view files, and this will show all the files that you're accessing and where they are. So because this is a demo set that I got from live, it's using all this factory content except for this edit, this little guy that I keep playing with. You can edit it using an external program. So for instance here I've linked it to Audacity. When you hover over the sample, if you look at the bottom, so it shows you where the sample is. Always remember, once you've found your missing files, or if you want to collect all your files into one project, go to collect into project, hit yes, and do not forget to hit collect and save at the bottom. This is very, very important. If you miss out this step, it's not going to save any of the things that you've done. And finally, before I finish off, I want to tell you about packing. So if you want to archive your projects and you're not going to be using them for a while, you can save up to half the disk space that it takes up just by packing it into a pack. So Ableton has lossless compression that you can use. So if you want to package a project, go to the project, command click manage project, and scroll all the way to the bottom. You'll see packing. Might look like this. Just hit the little triangle to expand the window and hit create pack. You can save it in the pack, and I've successfully created my archived pack. Yeah, you've archived the pack. Now I suggest you move it into like an archiving file so it doesn't clog up all of this here. But when you want to unpack it, so you might want to move it to this packs file over there, but you just double click, select the destination for the pack test project, and you can just access it as normal. So with all these things in mind, you should have a really good handle on how to manage your projects and sets, particularly through this manage files command, all the various exporting things that you can have. And one little tip that I want to tell you about previewing, which I didn't tell you before, is so you can preview here or using your keyboard or using Shift Enter. You can also hover your mouse onto this scratch tab, and by clicking you can preview a file from a very specific location. If you are hovering here and you're not getting this speaker icon, head on over to Live Preferences, go to Look and Feel, and go to make sure that Permanent Scrub Areas is on and not off. Ugh, scratch, I called it scratch. It's a scrub area, guys. See, now you can't play it from a random place. So make sure it's on. And make use of those templates, guys. It can really increase your workflow. Next week we'll be looking at arrangement view. I can't wait to dig into that. Can finally start making some cool things. Just remember, I am just explaining how Ableton Live works and how to use it. I'm not going to be explaining to you how to make cool beats and things, but if you do want more lessons on that, please get in touch. And as always, have fun.